Audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I'm Sabahat Ashraf, also known as iFaqir, and today, as usual, we have Ms. Azam Saab on our panel, and we are fortunate today to be in touch with Yasir Latif Hamdani, who is a lawyer, thinker, activist, and has been prominent on several issues, both as a lawyer and as an activist. In the Pakistani context, he is one of those rare people who make it a point and often identify themselves as a jihadist. And I think he won't mind my saying that he also does sort of pattern himself after his icon. An icon that various parts of the Pakistani context and now, interestingly, in the Indians are taking a fresh look at. So let's jump into this. Hamdani sir, first of all, welcome and thank you for being on the show with us. I'm trying to see where to start with you on this, because part of what we want to do on this show is have you help us understand the reality of Pakistan today. That's the overarching thing. And amongst the things, since you've been so engaged, we'd like to discuss freedom of speech, the legal situation, the regional situation, and maybe even get some input from you on lessons that Pakistan has for India and what's going on in India, and specifically on the Kashmir issue, which you, let's start there. You recently put out a video, which is actually kind of what triggered us to finally reach out to you. We've been talking to you. We wanted to get that point of view because it was something scratching at the back of my head, and you came out and said it very vehemently and passionately, that the position being taken by the Pakistani government and by the Pakistani establishment, let us put it all out there, is not the position that Pakistan has traditionally taken. And in fact, I found it ironic that the only Pakistani voice before your video that actually called into question the whole idea of Article 370 was the statement from the ISPR. So how did we get here, and what do you see in that mix?
Well, I think one of the things that has happened with this entire 370 fiasco was that it has become sort of front and center to the debate. I think that this was very well planned by the Indian deep state, as it were, if you could call it a deep state, but in terms of South Bloc and so on and so forth, the Indian External Affairs and the Indian Defence Ministry. I feel that they have planned this in a way that they would bring the other side, which is us, which we've historically resisted, the idea of 370, the idea of document possession, the idea that Kashmir can in any way be a legitimate part of India, and bring us to a position where we are pleading that Article 370 should be restored in its original form as it was before 5th of August 2019. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think it was very good politics on their part, because the fact of the matter is that, after all, Article 370 is a much better situation for the Kashmiri people than what is there right now. Now, India has arbitrarily divided Kashmir and Ladakh into two. It has, what is going on in terms of curfew, in terms of what kind of, restrictions have been put on their freedoms of, freedom of movement and freedom of expression, etc., etc. All of this is a huge problem. And obviously we are going to take this position. But what happens when the Indian Supreme Court strikes it down? And I'm pretty sure, even now, people think that but I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court is going to strike down the presidential notification because it has no other way. The Constitution is very clear, and there is a case law. It's the State Bank of India versus Santosh Gupta. It's a 2017 Supreme Court judgment by Justice Rohinton S. Pali S. Nariman's son, Rohinton Nariman, he has given a very clear judgment on the issue of legislative assembly and the issue of constituent assembly and how it is to be read. Now, in the absence of a legislative assembly, there is absolutely no reason why that presidential notification should stand. Now, this is a legitimate position, but what happens when Supreme Court of India actually strikes it down? Then, obviously, our government, being run by the people that it is, and I call it a kakistocracy, and then, in addition to being a kleptocracy, I also call it a kakistocracy.
I think you're being a little polite in not explaining what the word kakistocracy actually means. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the lay definition is ruled by idiots.
Yes, essentially. Inept people, I would like to say.
Sorry.
But yeah.
You're a lawyer, I'm not.
Yeah, so kakistocracy that we are going to celebrate it. And we want to say, oh wow, we've done an extraordinary job in terms of getting India to go back on, even though that is what the legal position is. Now, the real sort of political situation is that, I am forced to agree with those who say that the UN resolutions are never going to be implemented. This is an unfortunate reality. India is unlikely to ever come to a position where it would accept, a UN resolution, the UN resolution of the plebiscite under UN resolutions to be undertaken. Now, what should be Pakistan's position? Legally, we are bound to the UN resolution. I mean, we cannot move away from that. And if we try and change the status of, Gilgit-Baltistan and try to integrate it into Pakistan, that itself would be a violation of the UN resolutions. So we are in a very bad situation. But the position that I think we would be taking, or we should be taking, is that once the Supreme Court strikes down the presidential notification, while we are welcoming the decision, we should still insist on the fact that Article 370 was never acceptable to us in the first place, because it goes against, it is actually delaying the implementation of UN resolution. However, this is what our legal moral position is. The real politic of it all is actually an entirely different matter, and I just feel sorry for the people of Kashmir, because they're going to just face this crisis for a very long time, and there's going to be no resolution. And when there is going to be a resolution, it is going to be, unfortunately, in favor of the powers that be, and that those are Pakistan and India.
So, what
respective administrative areas?
Right. So, what we are hearing from parts of the Pakistani, what we chattering classes, is them saying, "Oh, tum to pehle kehte the Jinnah Sahab was right, and this doesn't work." But I would like to ask you that in a different way. Doesn't this kind of make the point that the situation through which, or the legal regime under 370, through which India was holding on to Kashmir, had gotten to a point where it was just plain untenable? I mean, it was supposed to be a temporary solution, and they were trying to make it last forever. And doesn't this current situation of them having to, or moving beyond it, put us in a situation where it kind of makes the point that, there's no way that Kashmir can be a normal part of India. Either they had 370, or now they're going to the union territory model. How does this work? I mean, what's your legal and sort of political analysis of that?
I think it's absolutely clear that, in terms of it being a temporary solution, that might be the case. But even if you're going to overturn that temporary solution, it has to be done in a constitutional way. That constitutional way was not followed by the Indian government. So as far as that is concerned, India is, let me be very clear, Kashmir has always seen itself as a separate state from both Pakistan and India. And it has to be treated as such. I mean, we can have some sort of a commonwealth or an alliance, or some sort of what we call in Urdu ilhaq, but that commonwealth or that sort of thing cannot be that Kashmir can become an integral part of Pakistan or India. The Kashmiris are very clear on that. When the judge is I know this for a fact, knowing lawyers from Kashmir, when a judge from the Indian Union comes to Kashmir, these Kashmiri lawyers don't bow down to him, which is regular custom in high courts. These Kashmiri lawyers don't bow down to him because they see that as an occupying authority. So as far as Kashmir is concerned, it is never really going to be a part of India unless, of course, they change the demographics, and that is what we fear. Now, the interesting question is, and I really want to address this because, something, I can go back to Jinnah and Jinnah being right. I think that is, as someone who, as you rightly said, that I try to back myself on him, as someone who admires the man, I think that we probably are dragging him into this debate unnecessarily. And the reason is that Article 370, the way it existed before 5th of August 2019, is the kind of solution that Jinnah had wanted for all of Pakistan. So what has happened really is that if some of us had this notion that the cabinet mission plan would have worked and partition of India would not have happened because of the cabinet mission plan, well, we've been disabused of that notion. So in a way, Jinnah is right, but then Jinnah of 1946 has been proven wrong as opposed to Jinnah of 1947. So that's a very complex, nuanced debate. What has come out very clearly, what people have been saying for a very long time, not necessarily in Kashmir but all over India, is this idea that the more India democratizes, the more it would move away from its secular, multicultural, sort of superstructure that was imposed on it. And that is something that Jinnah had warned against as early as the 1920s, which is why it wanted a consociational solution instead of a majoritarian model. So in that sense, that thing has come true. So just to clarify that.
So to conclude that, I guess we'd say Jinnah was right, but he wasn't saying what we think he was saying at this point, which tends to come up in a lot of discussions of Jinnah and a few others. So, Ms. Basab, I think you wanted to bring up a couple of other issues here.
Yeah, no, actually the thing is that you, let's gear because we have a short time left, and let's gear on the other one because we discussed enough about the Kashmir issue.
About Kashmir, right.
Kashmir issue, although I had some more questions. It was a very interesting discussion. I wish we had more time with him.
We need to have more of these.
We can have a full show with him if he would allow us in the future.
As Hamdani Saab said, there's a lot of nuances here, and that nuanced discussion just doesn't happen.
Yeah. So I will skip all that. And Hamdani Saab, the way we live in outside the country, and when people talk about our legal system, I mean, when the people who know about Pakistan, India, they always compare between India and Pakistan. And they say, well, in India, even generals are being called in the Supreme Court, and if they do something wrong. In Pakistan, I mean, no court has the courage to even call generals to do that. The way it looks from outside, I mean, just please try to educate us how the legal system really works in Pakistan. I mean, and this is for laymen like us, laymen like those people who want to understand and want to listen, somebody like you who are the part of that system. And this is common say that, everything is good and what is happening with Nawaz Sharif and all that, everything is according to law and all that. And people say, oh, they are corrupt people and they are proven and they are in jail. I mean, just please explain us that, is it true, this rhetoric?
So yeah, as far as the legal system is concerned, just sort of basic few facts. It's a common law system, so it's divided into sort of hierarchies and stuff. It works. Mostly in commercial issues, it seems to work better. But when it comes to lower courts, and when you talk about civil litigation in terms of civil disputes between people on property, etc., it is a very slow system. And that is largely because of lawyers shirking their responsibility and their, their ethics that they are required to follow under the bar practitioners, the Act of Practitioners and Bar Councils that exists. So a lot of lawyers are actually violating their ethical duty to clients, and that is why there are a lot of delays. The Pakistani civil procedure code is from the British, 1898, and then you have the criminal procedure code, which is from 1908. These laws have been there for a very long time, and while the British themselves have updated their laws like many times since then, we haven't. Yes, even if these original laws were implemented in their the true sense of the word, for example, adjournments were not granted without sufficient cause and reason, things would get better. Unfortunately, we are in no mood to implement the system, and that seems to be the biggest problem. The bigger question that you ask in terms of our courts actually taking on the deep state of the
signal issues here.
That has figured out our civil and military imbalance. Unfortunately, the civilians are very, very scared of taking on the military authority. And then there is obviously a constitutional bar in certain matters under Article 199, fundamental rights when they pertain to the fundamental rights of an officer in the army who is being, or a person who is subject to the Army Act, then you cannot file a writ petition in these matters, especially which pertain to service matters. So the question of bringing generals into the court is pretty much out the door. Sometimes it is done, but it is certainly not done as often as would be the case. And I would say that we have to give India that. The military there certainly is more, or is slightly, I shouldn't say slightly, probably that's an exaggeration or a wishful, but they're certainly more responsive to the state and civilian authority and the judicial institution than our military is. And that is unfortunately how it is in Pakistan. As long as we don't resolve the civil-military imbalance, we're going to continue to have this problem in Pakistan. And in terms of running of courts and stuff, there are problems with it. There's considerable effort that is needed. Even the lawyers' movement that was supposed to create this independent judiciary actually did not focus on the real issue, which was the lower courts and the justice at the doorstep, because what they focused on was the superior judiciary, high courts and supreme court. They didn't focus on your civil court, your magistrate, and your sessions courts, and the courtrooms and civic or the legal are in terms of how justice is delivered, and then it is obviously delayed, and when once justice is delayed, it is essentially denied, right? So that is what the problem is in terms of the legal system in Pakistan, right?
So that ends up being a procedural problem that becomes a systemic one. So that, I guess, is where we are on that. But I didn't want to close this program with you without discussing to a little bit the freedom of expression issues in Pakistan, and now we are seeing the same issues crop up in India. And I've always been, in my work as a blogger, and when we were back in the day when we were working on censorship issues, India itself has had a long history of blocking and banning things. Famously, it was the first country in the world to ban satanic verses, which, whether you like the book or not, was an act of banning a book. And the laws that were used back then were still the British colonial era laws that were used for. They have their own articles, and the article numbers are still the same, whether you talk about freedom of speech or you talk about blasphemy and you talk about LGBT rights. All those issues, the law, the numbers in the penal code are the same, whether it is India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Fiji, Nigeria. So On freedom of speech specifically, because also we do this show from Silicon Valley, you've been active on that. There was a time when basically Pakistan had blocked YouTube, and you were part of that process of litigation to get it opened up. Give us a little, if you can, as rapidly as you can, hopefully, because we are a little short on time, the update on that. What is the situation in Pakistan with respect to freedom of speech? How does it reflect on India? And as we saw, if people are reading between the lines, the way India was able to shut down the internet for Kashmir, to me says that they can do it for the rest of the country too if they want. What are the regimes there? What exactly is the status?
Well, in terms of freedom of expression issues, there's very little to choose between Pakistan and India. You rightly pointed out that Kashmir was an issue. There are certain things that are better in India, but pretty much the internet shutdowns, the freedom of expression and speech that is there, and Pakistan and India have identical language in their constitutions, by the way, except for Glory of Islam, which is there in the Pakistani constitution. Everything is essentially the same. So they're actually mirror images of each other. So the security, morality, integrity of the state, etc., etc.
I think in Indian, correct me if I'm wrong, Indian law and constitution does mention that the exception, they don't say glory of Islam, but the exception is incitement or offending the religious sensibilities of other citizens, which in effect is the same thing.
Yeah, no, that is what you're talking about is the Indian Penal Code, which is the Pakistan Penal Code, the same. So that is 295A and 153 of the Indian Penal Code. But in terms of constitutional rights, the freedom of expression, the fundamental right of freedom of expression, as is worded in the Indian Constitution and the Pakistani Constitution, are almost identical. And so both states have kind of allowed legislation to actually overrule those fundamental rights to a certain extent, and that is what is happening with these. This is why these IPC laws that you are talking about, the 295A of the Indian Penal Code and the 295A of the Pakistan Penal Code, and for that matter 295B and C of the Pakistan Penal Code, have been considered or have been upheld as constitutional. So that is there. Pakistan, unfortunately, the recent legislation around internet and internet expression or the use of social media, etc. When we talk about the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, with Section 37, which gives PTA the blanket power to ban and block websites, I think all of that has affected. I mean, these came during, let me just be very clear, it's not the current government that brought the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, but it is the current government that has given it teeth by actually using it. And so what you have are about 1 million websites that have been blocked in Pakistan. You have Twitter users who are given notices by Twitter because our government, PTA usually, actually complains to Twitter. And these are for all sorts of any criticism of the government, any criticism of the military for that matter, and any criticism of sort of any mention of the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, etc., etc. So all of that can land you into a bit of a trouble, a spot of trouble with the authorities, as it were. Now, this is unprecedented for Pakistan in the sense what has been going on over the last 15 years as electronic media and social media have they expanded in Pakistan, electronic and social media. We haven't seen this kind of censorship before. So in that sense, Pakistan has definitely taken a step backwards. I don't know what the Indian situation is, but what is happening in Kashmir certainly says that it is the same there, or if not worse. But that is entirely up to Indians to say whether that is actually the situation on the ground or not. But Pakistan definitely has gone back considerably from what it was, say, in 2014, say in 2012. So, for example, when we're doing the YouTube case, we could get up and argue certain points, which now, so for example, one of the points I took in the YouTube case was that there is no law that allows PTA to actually censor websites. So that was one of the major grounds that I took. Right now there is the law. So if now YouTube was banned, it would be significantly harder to get it back because of this law. So that is currently where we are in terms of freedom of expression, and all the things that you hear, all the complaints that you hear from the journalists about censorship, about harassment by the FEMRA, which is the Media Regulatory Authority, the Electronic Media Regulatory Authority, and sort of censorship of newspapers and notices that are given. I think that they're all very legitimate and right in terms of what they're saying. I mean, there is an active censorship campaign which continues to go on in Pakistan, and it is a very tragic situation for a country that aspires to be a democracy, but aspires and fails repeatedly. So that is.
One little thing I'd clarify for our viewership here is when you say 1 million websites, you're not being metaphorical, right? It's literally is about 1 million websites. They have a list.
It is precisely 1 million websites that have been blocked.
So yeah. So Ms. Basab, anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think we talked to him enough, and it's very nice of him that he stood with us. He's a very late night in his.
It's really late night in Pakistan. Hamdani Sahab, बहुत शुक्रिया. This is great to be able to talk to you in this pretty freewheeling and open forum, so to speak, and hopefully we would
like to keep talking to him if he allows us to keep in touch with him.
We would love to keep talking to you. For the last few shows, we've been saying that both in Pakistan and also in the region, India and all, voices are starting to get frozen, and we really need to keep these channels open, have these discussions. So audience, until next time, please check out our Urdu shows as well. We are actually doing a couple of shows with Hamdani Sahab off the bat that you need to catch up on. And as I was saying at the beginning, our Indian and other friends who can have a working knowledge of Urdu, Hindi should listen to the Urdu shows as well, because we cover a lot of ground there. So until next time, Allah Nigabad.